9 o'clock, and Chris Dickinson's running a little late. I'll act as a committee chair, call the meeting to order. First item is Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Allegiance
of
to
the
the flag
United States of America,
States
and
of
to the republic for which
and
it
to the
stands,
republic for which
one
it
nation,
stands,
under God,
one nation,
indivisible, with liberty and
indivisible,
justice
with
for all.
liberty and justice for all.
A quorum is present. I'm not aware of anyone looking to make public comments, although we do have somebody here incognito. And it's a festive day indeed. All right, what are your wishes relative to the minutes of the September 7th meeting? In the packet? Moved by Supervisor Gisselman, seconded by Supervisor Straub. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of approval of the minutes will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carried. Supervisor Dickinson will be just a few minutes. Should we, does it make sense to jump to the educational items while we're waiting for him? And so he's here for that discussion on the budget? Yeah, I would ask, I think it's more important for him to be here during the budget discussion. So if we could jump to that, sorry, Jim, but catch you off guard.
Highway side, currently we're finishing up our construction on Highway B.
We are finishing up our construction projects. County Trunk Highway B will be paving that next week through the village of Marathon. As you recall, last year we did a jurisdictional transfer. Once we get that paved and centerlined, that will be transferred over to the village. So we completed the curb and gutter. Our other major construction project for the summer is the Highway K project. They finished paving the roundabout last night up there. So the landscapers need to come in next week. We need to get our signage put up. We need to do a little handwork of paving. So the County Trunk Highway K, if it isn't wrapped up by the end of next week, the early part of the following week should be also taken care of. Another item that we have pressing, we got working on, and it's been delayed and been questioned a few times, is out of our Stratford shop. We have a lift out there that we've been dealing with for some time, well over a year, trying to replace that lift. We brought in some specialists. We thought we could repair it. After the specialists got there, they said they would not stand behind any repairs. As far as safety, when you start to put trucks up over your head, they would not stand behind anything. So we've changed our direction on that. To replace the lift in ground would be $217,000 roughly to put a new lift in there. So we are going to go with some portable lifts, which we have to do some concrete work. We'd have to do concrete work both ways, but we're going to put in portable lifts, and we're going to go from, like I said, well over $200,000 to a cost of about $116,000 to put in portable lifts. We use the portable lifts in Wausau. The guys love them. I'll be honest with you, the guys out in Stratford are a little hesitant, but they are the best option for the department. So we are going to save a little over $100,000 and go with some portable lifts out there. Otherwise, our shop is busy. Starting to convert trucks over for the winter. Salt is rolling in every day. So, and the office is been working on budget items, and we are also working on a new CHEMS project. Go to get a scanner, so when we can do inventory, we can complete that in a timely and more accurate fashion. With that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions relative to the Commissioner's update? If not, we'll turn it over to Jerry.
Thank you. I have project updates in the packet. We are continuing to work on reporting in Workday, working on the budget with Adaptive with Christy, making slow but steady progress.
We're done.
There we go.
Great, but it's done.
We got it done. The next big thing with Workday is benefit enrollment for next year. We got kind of a break, in my mind, a big break, in that the city and the county both decided to stay with the same insurance provider and the same benefit structure. That would have been something that we would have had to dig deep into quickly and fast in October. So all we have to do with that is just change the prices. So benefit enrollment will be a lot less work than I had thought it was going to be a few weeks ago. So that's helpful. The biggest project we have on the table all of this year was Server 2012 remediation. We have about 320 servers. Most of them are virtualized. A lot of them were Server 2012. Microsoft stops primary support for security patches on Server 2012 in 2 weeks. So we, since about a year ago, we've been really focused on Server 2012 remediation. I think we've moved 170 plus servers from the 2012 operating system to either 2019 or 2022. We have probably 30 to 50 that we'll do extended support on starting in about 2 weeks. And we'll do that. We'll have to buy that license for a year, although they lowered the price substantially recently. So that we're making good progress on that. And then the other kind of substantial thing I think worth comment is our copier contract. It's called multifunction devices. That was up for that was at the end of its 5-year term. We put that out for RFP a couple of months ago. Looked at 3 providers and signed a contract with Marco, which was the one that had the previous 5-year contract just a few days ago. So Lance signed that contract I think on Monday. So we'll be going with the same structure, a 5-year lease on copier equipment. Excellent pricing on per page for black and white. Saved us a ton of money when we went to this contract. Those are kind of the highlights. Still working on Workday, still working on Server 2012, and then one other thing, we've been doing a lot of moves this year. If you're not familiar with the North Central campus, we moved social services into there. We moved. We set up the new and moved Crisis back to its home. We moved MMT, medical monitor treatment. Set that program back up. In the last couple of weeks, we moved all of the operational staff from North Central into their new facility, and then in 2 weeks, we move all of outpatient, and that will free up the whole middle. And then the other big project on that campus has been the conference suite that we've been continuing to work on. That's I think within about 2 weeks of being ready to go. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Well, we're at more the overview of the ordinance, if you want to. Unless we jump at 6A.
Did we already do 7A? We just did 7A.
You did 7A. You did 7A and B.
All right.
Just goes out of order.
Okay. So I guess then, why don't we just go to 7C and finish that up? Let's do that. If anyone has objection, just let me know. No? Okay. So 7C, overview of the Marathon County Assembly's ordinance.
All right,
Hi, can
Mr.
you all
Chair,
hear me?
I believe we have staff from CPZ that are on and are going to attempt to share their screen. Lori, are you on? Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Lance, can you hear me? What's going on? Yeah, no, you're gonna have to do it from here.
Can you hear us?
Hear you, Lori? Oh, it looks like they can hear us.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry about that. Yeah, we were planning to come up there in person. I didn't realize the order had changed, so I'll just share my screen from here though. So, here we go. Let me know if that's coming through.
We can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for having us to the committee today. We wanted to provide this committee an update on the Chapter 12.04 update, also known as the Large Assemblies Ordinance. As you may recall, just a little context or background here, in 2022, Corporation Council did review our existing Section 12.04 and found our Large Assemblies Ordinance had some complications in the fact that it was potentially unconstitutional and also parts of it were unenforceable. From that, also this spring, we brought forth Chapter 17 updates to the general zoning code. And at that time, we had a discussion with the county board as it related to special events. And from that conversation, the update of the 12.04 section of the Marathon County Code of Ordinances was moved up, so to speak, in Administrator Leonard's work plan for us to begin that update this year. So tasking CPZ, along with working with the health department, the sheriff's office, highway department, parks, and emergency management, a work group was formed. And that work group consisted of those departments I just mentioned, as well as representatives were asked for from the Environmental Resources Committee, the Public Safety Committee, and the Infrastructure Committee. And so we were put together to look at our existing ordinance and determine what a new or an update to that 12.04 ordinance would look like. And we started meeting in August and September, and now we're at the point of that we will have a draft ready to share with the three committees next Monday, as well as we'll be doing outreach to the towns in the unincorporated areas of the county with that draft ordinance. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what that draft ordinance looks like. So when we do email it to you, you'll have a sense of what you're looking at and what we're looking for in terms of comment and feedback. So when the work group came together in August, several of our first meetings were actually about what the purpose of a large assemblies ordinance would be if the county wanted to continue to have that type of ordinance and what its purpose would be. The two purposes that were decided on within the draft ordinance were they would be to regulate the assembly of large numbers of individuals in excess of those who would normally be requiring the services of health, sanitary, fire, police, transportation, and utility agencies, which are regularly provided in the county. And two, to regulate the assembly of large numbers of individuals in excess of those who regularly occupy the event location to minimize adverse impacts to surrounding properties and uses. And again, these are what are proposed in the draft as the purpose of the ordinance. So. And everything from this point forward is also all proposed. The group also talked about the applicability of the ordinance, where the ordinance would be in effect if it is to be adopted by county board, and that the focus was on all the unincorporated areas of Marathon County, regardless of their zoning status. And we'll talk a little bit more about what's in the ordinance that accounts for that as well. And then again, the objective was to protect the people and resources of Marathon County. The group also discussed the threshold for the 12.04 Assemblies Ordinance, deciding on sticking with something similar to what was in the original ordinance, which was 3,000 or more attendees. But there was definitely some confusion or clarification that we worked with on the group to clear up in terms of what that definition really meant. So in the draft, the new definition states that it's 3,000 or more attendees at any one time or in aggregate over the course of 8 consecutive hours. So we tried to give a little bit more definition to when that 3,000 would kick in, but it is saying that only if an event is to have 3,000 or more attendees, and that could be at one time, or that could be that they accumulate over the course of 8 hours. The ordinance also addresses exceptions to when somebody would need to come to Marathon County for an assembly's permit. The exceptions that we have established in the draft and worked through with the group include places of worship, stadiums, athletic fields, arenas, auditoriums, and coliseums. We also discussed accounting for businesses that where their primary product of their business is already providing regular event space. And also we talked about how this would apply both in town zone towns and county zone towns too. So if a business or an event space has already gone through the appropriate zoning or permitting based on how they are currently zoned, they would not need to, in addition, come for an assembly's permit if they've already completed that process within their town zoning process or their county zoning process. So this would only apply to events that haven't done that. The other thing we talked about in terms of exceptions was government sponsored. So in the draft, you'll see there's a definition for government sponsored. And we're not saying that they still wouldn't coordinate with Marathon County as it relates to getting that permit, but we would waive the fees, any fees that would be associated. And that's sort of in line with how we do things with our zoning code as well. We don't charge our town zone towns fees when they need a zoning permit. Speaking of fees, we are still working on a fee schedule that would be adopted as well if the ordinance is adopted. The two types or two areas of fees that we've discussed are that there would be an application fee for the assembly permit itself, and that would be related to just recovering the costs of what it takes the departments to review that permit. But we're also working on a schedule of fees as it relates to recovering costs for the services the county may have to provide in addition to any normal services. So typically an event will come with possibly some requests or some potential efforts needed from county staff to help with that event. And so we want to establish a fee schedule with that so that we can meet the requirements of the request, but also recoup costs for our county staff who are maybe putting in hours or services above and beyond what we would normally do. In terms of implementation, at this point, we are proposing that CPZ would be in charge of the intake of those applications. That is, I think, pretty close to what is in the old ordinance. I believe it used to go through, what did it say? That it used to go through a committee that doesn't exist anymore, but the zoning administrator was identified in the previous ordinance as the oversight. One of the reasons we chose CPZ to continue with this process is just because it is very similar to other processes we oversee in the county. So we have a lot of the staff and people in place to help facilitate processing these applications. So an application would come in, we would determine what other departments need to be consulted to review that permit and distribute it to them and get their approvals before issuing the permit. We're also working with Corporation Counsel on the enforcement process as it relates to those permits. So there would be an enforcement process, but that is still being developed. Our timeline for adoption. So we did start working on this again earlier this summer with that work group. Right now we're at the point of having a draft that we're ready to circulate starting next week to get feedback from public safety, infrastructure, and environmental resources. At that same time, we're going to do outreach to the towns in the unincorporated areas of the county and ask for their feedback and comments on the draft ordinance. We'll come back to you all in November with some summary of some of that input and things we've heard from other committees. Then we'll go back to the work group to try and work through comments we've received to see if we can address those in the draft and how we want to address them in the draft. And then ideally, we'll bring the final ordinance before the standing committees in December or January with a final presentation to the county board for its consideration of adoption in January of '24. So for the 3 standing committees that are part of this process, the role we're asking is for you to take a look at that draft ordinance that'll go out next week. The date should have been updated on this slide, but we're sending it out Monday, October 9th is our goal. And then when we meet with you again in November, we'll ask for your initial comments and ask you to submit all final comments on the draft ordinance by November 10th. That's the end of this overview. I'll let Lance impart any additional things I missed too in that presentation. So. And I also have Shad Harvey here. He's our zoning administrator to answer questions. So.
Lori, I don't have anything. Great job. But we are
Yeah.
happy to take any questions you guys may have about the process.
Supervisor Robinson.
Just a couple of comments. Supervisor Straub and I represent the Infrastructure Committee on that work group. And what it, excuse me, the original purpose was to try to get at the issue of the demands on staffing to provide support services to this. And this addresses that for some of the larger assemblies. It does not necessarily address those specialty events, for instance, an Iron Bowl run through the county where we're asked to provide those services. So we will need to address that potentially going forward outside the context of this ordinance. So I think we're trying to, we talked last time about the mechanism for guaranteeing payment and other things, and we'll, I think, finalize that next Monday. But there are some hanging chads, or whatever you want to call it, that we still need to address that get at what's the county's role in those assemblies that aren't governed by the ordinance.
Any additional questions? Anyone? Comments? Supervisor Straub.
Thank you. I guess I'm looking at the implementation section of the presentation, and where it's we have Corporation Counsel reviewing the enforcement and violations. I guess my question would be, would the enforcement also have some kind of penalty attached to it if there was a violation? Would that be implemented into this this revision that we're working on? Thank you.
I can speak to that a little bit, Supervisor Straub. It would be similar to how the current unenforceable ordinance is written, in that there would be a citation and court process for violations. So, yep, there would be like a financial penalty or forfeiture associated, and then policies would need to be developed about enforcement, and particularly stepped enforcement if that's appropriate, depending on what kind of violation you have. And the process would be, if there was a violation, a citation would lead to a court appearance and a court process for those violations, like similar to other zoning violations that we have in the county.
And as a follow-up, would you be able to tell us what those fines and penalty fees would be at a ballpark?
They'll definitely be in that draft that gets distributed. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what the number was, but certainly that's also something that the committees and the board can review and determine whether that amount is appropriate. I can't remember off the top of my head what it's currently suggested at, but I'll get that to you.
Yeah, I believe, Mike, we can answer that. Right now, it's proposed as, I believe, a scale of anywhere from 1,000 to up to 25,000, and that's similar to some other citation fees. Like there's a sliding scale associated sometimes, depending on how egregious the violation is determined to be. So, does that sound correct, Mike? That's what we're looking at.
Yep, the sliding scale sounds correct. Yep.
So one question, couple questions. One is, we're considering the number of people, and I'm just wondering how that would be determined. How do you count 3,000 people? Is that, how, and then how do you then enforce whether someone violated that? Is kind of where I'm going. Is there like drone footage? Is it, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about this. I mean, I think obviously there's not going to be a lot of events that will probably meet this threshold in the county, at least as of right now. we would encourage applicants to reach out to us if they think they might be anywhere near that threshold. And depending on how they describe and share the event with us, we would probably encourage them to go the route of getting the permit if it looks like they're anywhere near that 3,000 mark. From an enforcement standpoint, it can be tricky in terms of determining if someone knowingly violated or went over that number. Certainly, you know, if they thought they were only going to have 1,000 people and it became a super popular event, and all of a sudden, maybe through media coverage and things like that, where we realized it was way more than that, and they didn't knowingly do that, I think we would just remind them that they need to come back to us on these permits is what we would probably have to do. But if there was proof they knowingly circumvented the process, I think that would be another conversation. So I'll let Shad or Mike add anything there too. So.
I'll add one thing, Lori. I think building on that idea that Lori just talked about, that, you know, this concept, we're not going to be out there with a ticket counter counting people that go in. Really, the penalty section of this ordinance, in my mind, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it or making it more complex, I guess it's on perspective. It's in the event the time we're going to get called is when something goes wrong, right? That's what that's why these ordinances exist. I have historically referred to them as, in my mind, they're like the Woodstock ordinance, you know, like, holy man, there's a pile of people and something goes wrong and law enforcement have to respond. And there's a way, to your point, Supervisor Dickinson, to establish that there's significantly more than 3,000 people. But our hope is that, as Lori referenced, this ordinance really is a planning tool for individuals looking to have these events that, you know, if it's me, you know, the Balloon Rally, for example, they did a great job. This ordinance, I don't expect it to have much impact on them because they are very responsible, experienced event holders. They know the things they need to think about and have plans in place, as opposed to if Lance is going to put together a large event. I wouldn't think about all the things that are in this draft ordinance that the work group has put together from those various committees. They've done a nice job of saying, hey, you need to think about each of these ideas, and here are some planning tools so that you have the necessary things. If you're going to have 3,000 people in one area for 4 hours, what are you thinking about for water, toilets, garbage, parking, emergency ingress and egress? So our hope is that it's more of a planning tool. But to your specific question on enforcement and how are we going to know how many people are there, some are easy because they'll have ticket sales, and some are a bit more challenging. But hopefully it's freshening up the ordinance to address the concerns that Corp Council had, and also freshening up the ordinance from a planning tool perspective. But enforcement is going to be a bit of a challenge. We'll work our way through.
Laurie, this is Jerry Klein. I have two questions or two observations. I just want to see if I understand where you're getting at. The two things that strike me that I'm interested in is, one, are you talking about events that are going to that would expect county support, like highway or sheriff's people? I think of Marathon Park. If it has 25,000 people and they know that the Wausau PD is not going to be able to handle it, is that an event that needs to register? Let's say the president comes to Marathon County Park. That's happened a few times. Sheriff gets involved.
In an incorporated area, it's
okay. That was my next question. So it doesn't apply to any incorporated areas? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Because the other thing that struck me was the one place that we have at least 4,000 people getting together on any given day on a regular basis is the ski hill on a Saturday in the winter. But that's an incorporated area now, so it doesn't matter. Okay. Thanks.
I did have two other thoughts. One, is there an appeals process in there? Okay. I see the shaking of heads, yes. And then the last kind of comment, second one is, we have the number of people, and I wonder, is there anything in there about the number of vehicles or type of vehicles, and if anything like that would have to be considered simply because maybe you have a trucker event, and so now you have 500 large trucks or something, and that would create an impact.
Yeah, we do have in the application requirements, we do have some guidance in terms of them explaining their parking plan, and I think it's one for every four.
Every
Is
four
that,
people,
yeah, one for every four people. One parking space for every four people.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Straub?
I guess the availability of the permit, would that be online 24/7, or how is that structured? The ability for somebody to apply for the permit for their large gathering?
Yeah, we would make the application materials available online. We would certainly encourage people to come and sit down with us, though, just to help go through the application. The turnaround time that we are proposing, because this was something that was brought up in Corporation Council's analysis of our existing ordinance, is 30 days from a complete application. So they submit a complete application, and we would make a decision within 30 days. And we believe that we know that is consistent with other processes that we carry out at conservation planning and zoning, and therefore we believe that's a fair timeline in terms of giving us enough time to review it, but also not being onerous on the applicant that they have to wait months and months or put it in months in advance. And then the appeals process, if we denied it for some reason, we are establishing an appeals process that would give them a very quick method to then appeal and get a determination from the administrator on our decision. So.
All right. Any additional questions, comments? Thank you for the presentation and for the update.
Yeah, so we'll be emailing that out next week, and then we will come back to your meeting next month as well. So.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're just going to finish up 7 then, Commissioner Griesbach, about tomorrow, 7D, 2023 North Central Fall Legislative Breakfast.
Tomorrow we are hosting our 2023 Tomorrow we are hosting our 2023 legislative breakfast at the Holiday Inn, Stevens Point. We have about 50 guests. We have, I believe, right now 8 legislators coming, 7, 8 legislators. The legislators, their staff. We have a good program lined up, focus heavily on work zone safety. We're also going to be talking about funding of bridges under 20 feet. And our current legislative white papers are going to be talking about. So registration again begins at 8 to 8:30. The meeting starts at 9. Should be all there by 11.
Thank you for the update on that. Moving on then back up to item 6A, discussion of HR, Finance, and Property Committee's 2024 proposed budget and possible recommendations regarding modifications.
I think I'll start, and then Jim, you want to go first. So this is now our third meeting of this variety, and I know this committee met and talked about budget prior to the administrator, prior to me delivering the budget to the HR, Finance, and Property Committee last week. You did that a number of times, but this is again in keeping with that idea, that concept of giving the county board and all the standing committees additional opportunities to review and consider the budget. So each of the departments are here to answer questions. They'll go over from their perspective, some of the big changes or big impacts within their budget moving into 2024. They'll probably also highlight some things in 23. But please feel free to ask questions. Christy and I have just started each of these presentations to this point by saying a couple of things. I'll say one that should sound familiar to when I presented the budget last time. Departments are going to have things they want to highlight, but from my perspective, this is really a status quo budget. There's nothing in the budget that's oh, it's a new program, here's $500,000 that it's funding. I didn't get that direction from any of the standing committees to do anything new, really, or from the county board. The big pieces of this budget, from my perspective, the things that we had to do were incorporate within our operating budgets the personnel cost and insurance costs that were passed on to each of the departments. And just so you know, kind of in terms of a process, departments don't get the opportunity to play in the personnel budget. That's HR and finance put that together, and that is, departments know what their personnel increases are, but they can't manipulate personnel increases to impact their operating budget. Their operating budget is the things they're going to talk to you about. Jim's going to talk to you about the costs outside of personnel. Personnel is a big one, for sure. We're a service-driven organization that relies on people to deliver those. But from that perspective, that's a big impact in my mind, just accounting for those things. Jim will talk, and all the other department heads will talk a bit about other aspects of their budget. But status quo largely from my side. And I'm sure Christy will talk about as we get through, and likewise, I'm sure Mary will use these words. But it's this idea of mapping. On the policy side, it's status quo. There's no real big new programs or services. On the accounting side, there is a whole lot of new. And we are remapping accounts from our old legacy system. We went from an obscene number of GL codes and lines within our general ledger to trying to very closely mirror the state chart of accounts. So things that looked a certain way in 2023 and every year before that are mapped fundamentally differently in various departments. The budget, big picture doesn't change. It balances, but individual departments, where things lived within those departments in terms of programs and lines, certainly changed. And I'll talk from my department's perspective. There were things that were in other areas of the county budget that now live in administration. It's different. I think it makes sense and it's logical as to why we made those changes. But on the accounting side, there's a lot going on, but it, again, doesn't impact, I think, doesn't impact the large policy questions you have as elected leaders of what programs and services do we deliver. I mean, you set those things within the scope of the statutes that are allowed. So that's the kind of introduction. I don't know, Christy, if you wanted to add anything before we go to the departments?
No, I think the departments did a good job. There's just a few things that we did in mapping. We're getting better at the reporting. Some of it was there, but it wasn't. Vehicles were living in the right place. We just needed to put them in the right spot. So that's about it. We've been doing better and better each time we go through this. So I appreciate all the patience from the departments and the committee members.
So with that, I think, Jim, you want to walk us through, and you do have within the packet, you have, like Christy said, some budget to actual reports that we started. Oh, I see Central Wisconsin Airport was first. I didn't want to jump over Brian. I'll defer to Mr. Chair, who we want to start with. And it's actually Central Wisconsin Airport. This committee is a little different than some of the others. Central Wisconsin Airport has already set their budget, and there's no levy, so we can talk about that one for a long time, Brian. And similarly, CCIT. Jerry's here to talk through, and I talked about it in my budget presentation, the changes in how we allocated the budget lines at CCIT. But really, Jim is your kind of more traditional department that other standing committees are seeing each meeting. So I'll defer to you, Mr. Chair, which department you want to start with. If you want to just work through the packet, then I think Brian wins.
Rock, paper, scissors. Let's go. Who's going to? All right, there we go.
Thank you, Chair Dickinson. Aloha, I'm Brian Griefey, Airport Director at Central Wisconsin Airport. As Administrator Leonard mentioned, this budget was approved by the Joint Airport Board on September 12th, 2023, and then the Joint Finance Committees of Marathon and Portage County on September 25th, 2023. So this is an update, certainly happy to answer any questions you have. In the packet, there's an agenda item summary really highlighting the notables. Certainly can go through a line item detail, but as was mentioned before, there's a lot of line items that have changed in this budget from previous budgets with our new budgeting software. So this first page really does a nice job of highlighting the differences. The first note I have is there's no county levy requested for 2024. Pause for applause. Big changes are just, I guess, notables. Debt service payments of $532,128 for 2024. That will be spending the last of our ARPA dollars in 2024. We're just saving that amount back. The rest will be spent in calendar year 2023 to close that out and help our friends at the FAA that do administer that money. Federal projects is certainly something that I know is near and dear to the heart of this committee. Include ordering a new airport rescue and firefighting truck, an ARF truck, fire truck. That is a new PFAS-free truck, something we're very excited about. Air traffic control tower equipment modernization. We received a grant earlier this year to upgrade our equipment, and then we'll be taking advantage of that in 2024. Just after the snow flies, because we probably will have a day or two where air traffic control services will be reduced. So we want to make sure, not flies, but after the snow is gone, we want to make sure the snow is gone for the season in that. Design of a replacement general aviation arrivals and departures building, a GA terminal. This is, in the next project, I'll be highlighting our projects that were born out of the recently completed airport master plan. That was approved by the airport board last month, I believe, actually this month rather. So this is one of the first projects on that. We're looking to take advantage of some newly available federal funding for that, and timing is right for that project. And then the final item, construction of a box hangar for large transient aircraft. Total cost about $4 to $5 million on that, but it is eligible for federal funding. That's identified as a need. We don't have a hangar capable of housing these large corporate GA aircraft that we do see come through, particularly during the winter. So again, funding opportunities that have historically not been available to airports are available now, and we certainly want to take advantage of those. Local projects that are just funded with Seaway budget is replacement of a pickup truck, about $50,000. New parking lot control equipment in our east parking lot, about $60,000. That's to mirror the equipment we have in our main lot. We're accommodating for the additional traffic with Avelo Air coming online today. Addition of a zero-turn mower, fuel farm backup generator, loader snowplow, and some additional painting service. Still evaluating whether it's contracted or a paint machine, but the value is the same at $60,000. As it relates to personnel, we're fully staffed. No positions are requested to be added or eliminated, but we do have 2 retirements budgeted for. Biggest change in our budget, at least in our operational budget, is the addition of Avelo Airlines. They're starting today with service, nonstop service between Central Wisconsin Airport and Orlando. That's twice weekly, year-round, flying 737-800 aircraft, so significantly more passengers. They fly 188 passengers at a time. So that will have an impact primarily on our concessions, so our restaurants, our taxi cabs, our rental cars, and we're looking forward to that. As it relates to the legacy carriers, American and Delta, we're looking at relatively flat numbers on that. They're still struggling from the pilot shortage, the national pilot shortage. So I am working with them to add service. We certainly need service, and I'm hearing that on a weekly basis. But given their pilot situation, from a budget standpoint, we're budgeting pretty flat for them. Expenses really are following a similar trend. It's just stuff's getting more expensive, so we're certainly trying to do more with less wherever we can. Increases our fuel, contracted service, health insurance, but we're not looking at a big increase with expenses. We do have an additional $30,000 marketed, or additional $30,000 added for a marketing campaign. if and when we get an additional destination on Avello. So more to come on that. We are using, as planned for in prior years, fund balance to cover. There is a deficit this year. With CARES, CRIS, and ARPA funding over the last 3 years, we've been in a fortunate position to put money into the fund balance, into the Seaway fund balance. And this is something we've been very upfront with the airport board about, is as we put money into that, and when that money's exhausted, we'll be in a position most likely where we'll need to deficit spend. In 2024 is where we start that. Something planned for, and as things turn around, we should be in a good position, if it turns around in 2 to 3 years. Let's see, just quick debt service update. We have 2 bonds out there, a 2012 note for $751,500. $155,000 of that is PFC eligible, and a $1,801,887 2015 note. These are both for the new terminal building. Of that, $156,224 is PFC eligible. For fund balance, we have an unrestricted fund balance of $4,500,000. Restricted fund balance, these are our PFCs, of $657,000. And our current PFC fund balance, that was the beginning of the year, rather. Current PFC fund balance is $864,000. So the fund balance is end of the year last year. We anticipate that increasing probably $500,000 plus this year. Just a quick item of note as it relates to project. I know you're very familiar with, we use primarily federal dollars, or a combination of federal and state, but on most of these projects, 90% of the project is paid for with federal dollars. Since 2017, the airport has invested in our facility $58,745,959. So it's been a good investment for both counties that are involved in the operation of the airport. Let's see, just real quick, I don't want to take up all your time. 2023 items of interest, very, very interesting year. 2023 has been. Velo Airlines, again, has been the biggest change we've seen or will see starting today. That was really made possible by that DOT grant, Small Community Air Service Development Grant, funded in part by Marathon County non-airport dollars and Portage County. So appreciate all of your support for that. That would not have happened if we didn't get that grant. So again, thank you for that. Total value, including DOT investment, federal DOT investment, Marathon and Portage County, is about $1.5 million. Runway 826, that was our big project. If you saw the mounds of dirt, that is finishing up at the end of this month. We just closed runway 17, opened runway 8 yesterday, runway 826. So that's the first time we've had traffic on it since March. We're just doing the intersection work right now. It's a displaced threshold, but that should be fully operational at the end of this month. Looking forward to having that project complete. Then just a few other items of interest. We helped Marathon County with the creation of the Pillars of Excellence Leadership Program, hosted a triennial mock disaster exercise this spring, got all the local fire, EMS, as well as counties involved. Again, we received the federal grant for our air traffic control tower previously mentioned, and the terminal area master plan. That's about a year and a half process. The preferred alternatives were selected earlier this month. That completes the highlights of the report. If there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Does anyone have any questions, comments? The only thing I would say is with Avello, it's pretty exciting that it will extend to more than this one destination, which we're starting today, which it looks like you have your Florida gear on.
I am flying today. I'm on that first flight, yep.
So that's pretty exciting that's happening. I know there's quite a few persons who took advantage of that when that happened, but there's 3 or 4 other destinations that are coming will really be an additional boost, so looking forward to that. But thank you for the report.
Thank you, Chair Dickinson.
All right, moving on then. think we'll just go down the list and we'll let Jerry take care of CCITC.
Sure, thank you. As Lance mentioned, we're similar to CWA and some of your other oddball entities. Our budget process begins in August. We're not departments. Anyways, our budget usually we usually get a draft of it in August, and we need to basically get it approved in September, which we did this year, because all of the three entities that own us, the city, the county, North Central Healthcare, they all need to have all our stuff done earlier than later. Lance and Kurt are your representatives on the city county IT board, and that board budget was approved in September. A couple of highlights. If you look at the first line, it actually says our total operating budget is going down 1.8%. That's a little bit of an anomaly for a couple of reasons. It is flat. We're not adding any staff. We're at the same staff level that we were last year. We're anticipating, we built into the budget 2.5% for salary increases. Nothing extravagant there. The main thing that's happened over the last 2 years, especially last year, was we were asked by our board last summer in 22 to reevaluate the way that we distribute our cost. It takes a little over $5 million to run the IT entity that supports the three of our owners. And what we did was we made changes to how we allocate different teams. And if you look at the middle of your first page, on page 22 in your packet, you can see a section called direct charges, and then I'd like to bring your attention to the couple of lines after that. So a group of our staff is allocated based on where they spend their time. We track our time like any accounting or law firm. All of our staff are tracking. So if I'm at the highway department for 2 hours to work on a project, and I have a staff person with me, we're recording that so that we can allocate our time based on our time study. Then we have a group of our staff in certain parts of our budget that make more sense to be allocated by user count. For example, our security licensing is usually by the number of employees in each team. And then we have a couple that we had to do a little differently. So if you look down into the third section where it says salary and benefit allocation, our business manager and our purchasing agent, we shared equally. So that's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I'll go back to our security staff infrastructure manager is based on user count, and our endpoint manager is based on PC time study. So we made that change last fall, and the goal that we were given was allocate our cost as accurately as possible, and so we made those changes last fall. The other thing that we've been doing over the course of that year and this year, and you'll see this in the 24 budget, is wherever we had software that was being used specifically by a department or by the county in particular, we have moved more and more of those costs to what we call direct charge, and that's in the middle of your first page. And working with Lance and Christy, we are working towards allocating more costs to the departments that are responsible for the costs. The goal, and Lance talked about this at your budget meeting last Tuesday. The overall goal of that is there's some cases where departments have programs that are grant funded, and we want to make sure that the grant funded programs, part of our spend at the county, is taking on all of the costs that are actually appropriate to that program. So any software that's being used by a department will be allocated to the department. Anything that's being used by all of the users in the county will be allocated out based on user count, typically, in those cases. A couple of other highlights. So those were changes we did over the course of 2 years. The direct charge, the chargeback. I mentioned about how our budget is done. It was approved in September. The other big change that we have in 2024 is we're moving to the next level of Microsoft licensing. It includes a whole bunch of security enhancements. It is more expensive. One of the things we worked with the board on was basically we're going to, as of January of 24, we're going to, all of the employees of the city and the county North Central will be tiered into Microsoft licensing based on what they need. So there's a small group of people, I'll pick on Jim's team, his highway workers that are out in the field, they don't need an email address, but they may need to be able to log into our network to do something. That's the lowest level of license cost that we have. It's pretty inexpensive. I think it's $4 a month. And then there's a group of people that need a mailbox but infrequently need it and don't need Office or Excel or Word. They just need to be able to have a mailbox to do some of their business. So that's the middle level. Basically, they'll have web access to their email accounts. These may be people that don't necessarily have a work at a desk. They may not have a laptop or a desktop assigned to them. I would use as an example of that maybe the cleaning staff in the facilities, and the maintenance staff in facilities and capital management. They need to have an email address so we can send stuff to them. They need to be able to log into our network, but they can do most of their work just occasionally logging into the website. And then the third category is all of the rest of the county staff that are in the room here that have basically full Word, Office, Excel licenses, full mailboxes. And so what we've done is we've taken that highest group to the next level of Microsoft licensing, but now we're going back to all of the departments and saying, what do you really need? And so we'll end up with everybody tiered into the lowest level, the medium level, and the higher level. So what we're planning to do is get that all set up by January of 24, and then be able to watch through the whole year of 2024 how that played out. And then when Christy and I get into working on the IT budget allocation for 25, somewhere around September next year, October, we'll have all of that data, and we'll be working with department budgets to move. Today, Lance's budget, basically the county overall budget, pays all of the Microsoft licensing costs. By 2025, we'll have distributed that to the departments as best we could. Any questions on that?
If I can, Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if I can, Mr. Chair. Just to build on that, Jerry went through that very well. This was no small endeavor, but as I shared in the budget presentation, this is kind of my thought process in a number of different areas, but Jerry hit on it very well. Allocate costs in the most equitable way possible. You look at the county's allocation to CCIT is going down. That's not a function like Jerry said. We didn't cut staff or dramatically change service level. All that stuff's staying the same. If you look, the city of Wausau and North Central are paying more. And I'll give you an example of kind of what pushed me to see the opportunity for this and the advantages of this work, and that is on-call password resets. I mean, we look every month at CCIT to see the number of on-call responses. It's expensive.
Just to clarify, that's
After hours. After hours on-call responses to reset passwords. Well, that's the departments that have control over that at the city, at the county, and at North Central. They need to feel those costs to take on the process improvements so that you don't call an IT help desk person at 2 a.m. to reset a password when there's a self-reset option if you take the time to do it. Well, so that's kind of what drove this. Similarly with software costs, the idea that, it's been my experience, Jerry, that every time there's a challenge within a department, the answer is inevitably a new software program. And we go down the rabbit hole of helping departments identify a software that will help them. But as Jerry said, until recently, it's not always been the case that the software cost lives within the departmental budget. Similarly with licenses, administration or IT are not best situated to determine, like Jerry said, what level of license is needed for a particular individual. And if they don't feel the cost, see that in their budget, the easy answer is always, well, give me the top one, because then I know it's enough. But it's not needed necessarily. So this is kind of that same driving concept that when I put in the first section of the budget message that, hey, what are some things we're doing to quote unquote balance the budget? And I talked about strategies. This is a perfect example of that. We're going to keep working to refine the way that we allocate those indirect costs, because their indirect costs are certainly not going down. Software license costs are certainly not going down. The benefit, and Jerry did a nice job of this at the CCIT Commission when we talk about what are the advantages of this tiered license structure. There's a lot of security on the back end that moving to this new license structure that it helps us and helps us long-term control costs. But I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on some of the things that we're doing to allocate those better, and Christy has something.
To let you know, we do allocate costs right now for software and for all those costs. It's the indirect cost plan. We've been doing that since it's been legally allowed for federal reimbursements of grants. So we already do that. We do calculate that and have a cost plan prepared. Prepared on an annual basis. This would just be a more sophisticated way of doing that. And then we will determine whether or not the indirect cost plan is capturing enough of those costs or if a direct method should be put in for each of these things. But this is the first step of really being able to analyze that as well.
Very good. Any questions? All right. Thank you, Jerry. So now from the appetizer and the soup and salad, we go to the main course.
Well, due to time restraints going last, I'll cut it down. Again, repeating what Lance said, that we're status quo budget basically, but it looks really different. Just not to the mapping portion, but there's other things that Mary had done different this year in our budget previous to last, with showing costs. When we worked with other departments, municipalities, it would show up in about 3 or 4 different lines. So Mary cleaned it up quite a bit this year. And if you have any questions, she is here to answer those. As far as the budget itself, our GTA unfortunately dropped again. As much money as I'd like trying to spend to get a rolling stock, or a rolling average up, it did drop. But one of the main reasons it dropped is the state share of cost again dropped. From 19.529% to 19.129%. So that share of costs continues to go down. It is something that I'm going to start working with the WCHA on, working on how we can start trending that number a different direction, because if that number keeps going down, it doesn't help our GTA funding at all. Some of the major items you're going to see is our rolling stock. We did have an increase in rolling stock, but we have received the $957,600 for over 12 years now. I worked with Lance and Christie in our budget. In addition to that, we are going to take some money out of our highway reserves to fund some other pieces of equipment. And the main reason is just cost of equipment. We have 40 plow trucks. To replace a plow truck right now is $375,000 to replace one plow truck with all the attachments on it. On 2021, just for some numbers, it was the cost of the chassis, just the chassis itself without anything on, was $100,000. 2022, it was $141,000. And this past year, now it's $156,000. So in 2 years, we've gone from $100,000 to $156,000. If I want to rotate those out on a 10-year cycle, I need to replace 4 trucks a year. Just replacing the trucks alone, at $375,000, I'm at $1.5 million. I can't even replace my trucks. So if I have 531 pieces of equipment at the highway department. A lot of those are plow, wings, and attachments, each one's individual. But if you minus off the plow equipment, I still have about 275 to 285 other pieces of equipment I need to replace at some point. So we looked at some of the items that we need to replace coming up here. We looked at replacing our sweeper truck. That one piece of vehicle alone is $425,000 to replace. We looked at a rubber tire roller replacement. This is a big roller that we use with a bunch of tires on. Those are $200,000 now. So we did take a look at 4 pieces of equipment, adding an additional $867,000 from our highway reserves to replace some pieces of equipment that we need. And then we also still have another $771,681. That is a rollover from past years. When the availability of trucks and chassis came into an issue, we had ordered trucks years back and were first receiving them, so they were budgeted. at one point. They were in our budget. We just haven't received the trucks. So we're looking at receiving them. Well, they told us January we'd be receiving them, and now they've pushed it back to the second quarter. So hopefully those trucks will be coming in on that. So that was with the rolling stock. Our paving program stayed the same. We're looking at paving the same amount of roads. Again, half of that money in our paving program comes from the registration fee. So if the registration fee goes away, we lose half of our program. We go from paving over 30 miles a year down to probably about 15 miles a year. The life cycle, we like to stick around that 20 years on a paved road for life cycle. We'd be looking at going to a 40-year life cycle if we would remove the registration fee from our paving program. Again, this committee has set the goal of a PACER 7 of 7. We started we review the roads every year now. Legally, we need to submit to WSDOT every other year. So we done the east side of Marathon County, and we're sitting, this up in my head looking what we had for 6s and 5s and the 9s and 10s. We're right close around that 7 right now. So we're maintaining it, but we do need that over $6 million a year to maintain that program. Some of our bigger projects next year with the SDP program are that we're getting federal funding. These are all a 80-20 split. Is County Trunk Highway J from 153 to 29, County Trunk Highway T from the county line to 97, and there's a large bridge on County Trunk O near the county line. Those are all 80-20 federal splits for us. So those are our major federal programs. Again, and then we have our normal routine maintenance program that we'll be performing next year, and our paving. So everything else stayed status quo on that. With that, if you have any questions regarding activities or the budget, again, Mary came to answer any of how the line items were adjusted. Again, that was it cleaned up our budget quite a bit. So credit to both Mary and Christy for working on those.
Are there any questions? Supervisor Robinson.
Just as a point, follow up on Jim and his rising costs. The rolling stock had not been, increased. So Chris, administration worked on developing a proposal to try to get some inflationary relief in there. So we added 200,000 plus the fund balance transfer. So we'll be building that rolling stock allocation each year to try to keep pace with inflation, although it probably won't let him catch up on all of his needs, but we did address that for highway, parks, and sheriff's department in the capital improvement budget.
Questions? Doesn't look like we have any questions. So
sounds good to me.
Thank you for that. So then here in our agenda, it doesn't look like we need to take any action on this. This is unless, well, let me pause there. I guess we have this information provided us. Are there any, I guess I would be asking, are there any recommendations for modifications that anyone, I think that's something that's on here, any discussion about that. So I don't know if any supervisors have any comments or questions about that, anybody online or anybody in the room. Supervisor Gisselman.
Well, I'm going to come back to the stock, the rolling stock. I mean, we just can't go much further. I mean, is our trucks going to just go out of service, or what's, if we keep on with this, what happens in 2 years? I'm afraid that, someday in the future, we won't be able to plow the county roads on Christmas Eve because we just don't have the material and the stock to get the job done. So I know that that's your forte. And what is the county? How is the county going to approach this? I kind of, your statements concern me with regard to the quality of our rolling stock most likely you can get by within a year or so. You know, you sort of tape together the stock. But so what's the plan for 2 to 3 to 4 years?
We will have to work with both administration and rolling the CIP committee on that, because again, we're talking to industry right now. They're starting to see some leveling off on these vehicles. At least that's their hope. On the downside is the availability of the parts are getting harder to also maintain these older vehicles. So it's something that we have to work with both the administration and the rolling stock committee on how to be able to fund these trucks. You know, we are looking at alternatives as far as anti-icing. You know, we're going more to anti-icing than the salt. So again, that even helps the trucks. You're not hauling as heavy loads. You know, you don't have the corrosion on the vehicles, is it? So we're trying to maintain our current pace and work with the administration. Again, the hope is that we're not going to see these costs of a $50,000 increase every 2 years, because at some point we will have to look at our whole program.
If I can add one thing, I think Chair Robinson, HR Finance and Property Committee Chair Robinson referenced this. The rolling stock policy hadn't been, as did Jim, hadn't changed in more than, it's like 12 years that the dollar amounts haven't changed. It was pretty easy. I think Supervisor Dickinson has pointed this out before when we talk about averages. When the numbers don't change, averages are really easy to calculate. The average of the last 5 years, it hasn't changed for 12. That said, the policy that was adopted by HR Finance and Property makes a really important change to your question, Supervisor Gisselman, that it indexes it essentially to either net new construction or CPI, so that it goes up. And hopefully, as Jim just alluded to, we don't have costs relative to this equipment that significantly exceed that, because that's what's caused us. I mean, it's been a real challenge. It hasn't been working for 10 of the last 12 years, but the last 2 have been really bad. That's where we've seen the 10+% inflationary figures. So make no mistake, you're absolutely correct. We're going to need to find ways to fund those things, but at least now we've recognized through the policy that the target is moving every year, so that there is an expectation that we find a way to fund those things. There are a number of ways you can fund them. Jim, in this year's budget, we did kind of a one-time correction, excuse me, with, like Jim alluded to, we had a significant draw from the highway reserve to fill that significant gap. Our spending this year, make no mistake, is more than just last year's $957,600 plus that inflationary factor over those years. We also kind of played a little bit of catch up. But we need to fund that inflationary growth each year. And then other counties have other ways to fund those things. I mean, Marathon County has historically not done single year borrowing with, you know, you borrow in November or December and pay off in January, your costs are low. I think our policy of utilizing a CIP rollover has served us well. We can look at some things, but the short answer is we need to buy that equipment. And Jim, you want to add anything?
Yeah, and one other thing, and Lance and Chris and I have talked about this, is some of those larger pieces of equipment, we may be single line this in the CIP. Example, we have a paver we need to buy probably in 2 years from now. We're looking at $600,000 for a paver. So those are going to be just a single line in the CIP request. So some of those bigger items that we always put part of our rolling stock, we're going to look at putting as a special line item, and then we'll still have our normal routine rolling stock.
And I think the answer, you know, building on that, the answer for the different types of equipment is going to be different. We've identified, you know, working and speaking with Enterprise about what vehicles might have a different strategy for replacement than the plow trucks and the paver, you know, those other pieces of equipment versus more traditional, like in my mind, I see more traditional vehicles. The opportunities we have with more quote-unquote traditional vehicles are different than probably the paver. I don't think Jim's going to be buying a paver, turning around and selling it in 4 years. That's probably not the way that's going to go. But, there are opportunities with, look at what Central Wisconsin Airport has done with their internal, just traditional fleet vehicles. They've seen some pretty significant success with doing that in a cost-effective way. Go ahead, Jim.
And one last item, I've talked to, I believe there was one other municipality, it wasn't even a county, I can't think who it was. They just program, they're buying one truck every year, and then they still have their rolling stock besides that, but that's the plow trucks are a whole separate line than the rest of your rolling stock. So that's an option that the CIP committee may want to look at, this not with us, but the sheriff's department, they can say, we're going to replace 2 a year, 3 a year, whatever it is, and then you still have your rolling stock beyond those items. But that'd be just a regular line item, which would be easy enough number to budget for because they're out so far anyhow. So I could easily get a number for a 2024 truck this year.
Supervisor Straub?
So, Jim, is there a state mandated replacement program that we have to replace these trucks based on a time frame?
No, the only one that we have is that rolling stock has our own thresholds that we have to have so many years or so many miles on it, but there's no state mandated one. Again, like I said earlier, the issue becomes trying to get parts for the older vehicles.
Is there a particular vehicle, plow, just for example, a plow that is a well-built product that is worth keeping, finding the parts for, and keeping it on the road longer than usual? If you know.
Are you talking about the truck itself or just the plow?
Yeah, a particular brand of truck that's been a good worker for you through the years, and it's worth seeking the parts at all cost instead of replacing it for $375.
Well, we look at, the program that we have, we had CFA and CAMSA before, it'll analyze what we all have into that truck. So we'll look at each truck before we replace them. We just don't replace a truck because it's 10 years old and it's got 150,000 miles on. We don't replace those. If they're running fine, we'll run them much longer than the CIP has. Most of our trucks are way beyond the CIP parameters that are set. So we will run them as long as we can still find parts for them.
Okay. And so you make the determination on which vehicles you want to keep in the fleet for as long as possible?
Correct.
Yeah, thanks.
When they leave our place, they're not reliable vehicles anymore. Let's put it that way.
One question I would have, and I appreciate all the work that you all had to do in this effort. My question, when we get to the new line items that we have, the new categories, it's very clear that there isn't an exact alignment. So if I were to look at something like gasoline and diesel fuel, which is at 519,000, but the budget is 1.55, but then next year it's 1.85. I'm trying, is that a direct one-to-one relationship on that item? Or is there some other cost in there that I'm not seeing as to why that would be?
You picked the one that we really changed a lot. We broke diesel and gas apart, and now we're just calling it fuel. So it's a combination this year of both.
So the difficulty then is if we were to look at this in that manner, it's really, it won't be effective. So is there a way, is there some categorization of some of these items, where you can say these are repair costs, right? There's like a big grouping of those, or these are, daily operation costs. Does that make sense? Or maybe I guess where I'm getting at is if I don't want to say, oh, I think that number is too high on that one line item, let's drop that by 5%, when that 5% might have been in another line item.
That is true. If you go down a few more pages, there was the breakout before Christy did the remapping, and I have notes on to over to the right-hand side. And I did break out personnel and some of those items. I think, Chairman, you need to go down a little bit further, the pages that are showing up here. Yes, yes. So there are breakouts. That section right there is revenues. If you go down another page, there's brackets that have the total personnel and the differences. And that's where we come back to how the budget was different between 2023 and prior years versus what's going forward. And you'll see the personnel in the middle. I can't see that far, but it's like 10 million, and then you're going to see 7 million over to the right. And a lot of that happened with the interdepartment charges within the highway, and so those were eliminated going forward. They technically should have been eliminated during the budget process in prior years, and it wasn't, but with the implementation of Workday, we're able to eliminate those, so you see a true picture of the costs of the highway. But the way the reporting is done now, it's really like an Excel data dump that's happening. And until they start working on the budget process a little different, in Kayenta you had personnel costs and then you had operating costs done separately. And so I tried to do that for some of them here on the right-hand side, but that's just going to be a report enhancement as we move into 2024. Because it is hard to see what items are in those. And there's a couple that have brackets. I think there might be another one a little further down on the sheet right there that has brackets as well. And those are for other raw materials. And so in Kayenta, we had one line item called other raw materials. And now in Workday, we're able to break out the asphalt from the culverts. And so we're starting to manipulate that data, and so that's why the bracket's there. But I think as we move into 2024 and the enhancements that CCITC is going to be doing on reporting along with Christy, I think you're going to have better reporting coming out of there.
Thank you for that.
That's why I brought her along.
I had one other question, and that is costs associated with any potential move of the highway department. Is any of that within here?
I had a line item in there for at least a land purchase, and Lance said, well, we'll cross that bridge, I guess, when we get there. So we did remove that. We do not have anything in the budget for that.
Thank you.
Is that under bridge age and culverts?
All right. Any additional questions, comments, thoughts? Are there any modifications that anyone is looking to make at this time? Supervisor Robinson.
I just, something that came to me actually right after Brian spoke, but I'm not sure that our KIP captures all of the capital projects at the airport. And so we'll work with Chris, so we may amend the KIP because the firefighting truck wasn't in there. The design for the general aviation and the pickup truck weren't reflected in there. And the question is, we need to capture that. I don't know that historically we did, but we did capture the tower replacement as it relates to the CWA budget. So I think we'll chew on that, and there's a potential that may be amended to reflect what's actually going on.
Thank you. Supervisor Gisselman.
Does it take a motion, or are you looking for some kind of a move by this committee today to move it on, or not, or just sort of, or we just listening and commenting?
I think what we're looking for from the Human Resources Finance Property Committee is for you to, if you've got some suggested changes to advance those. And we understand that there's a tight time frame, but there will also be the opportunity at your November meeting to potentially look at it again, and if something comes to light, to make those suggested changes to it. So again, we're trying to be more inclusive. As we go through the budget, if there's something that jumps out at you, we're looking for those modifications. I don't think we need an approve as is. And again, it's an iterative process. We're trying to build on it, and we'll get better every year.
I think that answers the question.
Well, I'm not sure it does, but go ahead.
Okay. Anything additional then? The last thing I would say, like I said, thank you before. there's a lot of information, and it clearly is a lot of work coming from where we were and the discussions that we've had over the past few years. So thank you to all the departments for that, and the leadership of Christy and Lance and HR Finance as well. I have no additional comments on that at this time. So we have no motion here, or we need no motion, no action. We would then move on to item 8, next meeting date, time, announcements, future agenda items. If there are any agenda items you would want brought up, you can mention those now. Supervisor Robinson?
There is a November 7th due date for broadband proposals with a capital fund of $42 million. We don't at this time have any internet service providers looking at that, but that may be something we may want to bring in if they advance a proposal at that time. We thought it was going to be a much lower threshold, in the couple of million, and now it's 42 million. So there's some people taking a look at it. So that may be an item.
All right. Any other announcements or agenda items? No. You can always make that request when we get the email from David. So pay attention to your email for that. With that, our next meeting is Thursday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. And we're moving on to item 9.
To adjourn.
I have a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.